Welcome back to the Fixed Ops Roundtable. I'm Sarah Vantine here with Ted Ings. Today, we're going to be talking about the myth of fixed costs. And Ted, there's a lot of challenges that dealerships may be looking at this year, and this is a big, important topic.
Right, Sarah, as dealers make their plans now for 2026, we're firmly in the fourth quarter and want to welcome the expert Steve Thompson, has a company called Integrity Cost Consulting, a great partner here at the Fixed Ops Roundtable. Shon Kingrey is the vice president of fixed operations at Kaiser Automotive Group. Gentlemen, welcome back to the Fixed Ops Roundtable.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ted. Happy to be here as always.
I want to go ahead and start the conversation, Steve, if it's okay with you, and challenge the assumption that dealership overhead is static. A lot of times we call them fixed costs, but very often they're not fixed at all. And I think you can help start to shed a little bit of light on that.
Yeah, I think so. I think a lot of organizations, dealerships assume these are fixed. They're set it and forget it type things where a lot of these service-based expenses, you might sign a three-year agreement and you only look at them every 3 years. And in between that time period, the bills are coming in. If they look right, they get paid. If they look reasonable, they get paid. However, we've seen it for at least the last 12 years where over thousands of invoices that we have reviewed, it's still over 90% of the time we're going to find errors and overcharges. It's no longer surprising to us, but I think it's surprising to dealerships and to organizations to see this because they say, I thought these were fixed costs. and we find out that they're not. And these are in areas like telecom, industrial laundry, waste disposal, utilities. Those are the four areas that we focus on.
You mentioned laundry waste invoices. A lot of times, as you mentioned, those are recurring invoices. And Shon, especially when you have multiple locations over some geography, I would imagine it's tough to hold that vendor accountable if it's an expected invoice each month.
It is, Ted, and I'm going to date myself here a second, is back in the day, back when AdCon, if those who remember AdCon in the fixed ops world were trainers, Chrysler and Ford made you go to a class. It was called the 7 controllables. And the 7 controllables were the 7 things on a financial statement that you're responsible for controlling. You can't control the rent factor. You can't control the boat that the dealer principal has or the helicopter pad that he built. But there are things you can control. And certainly not taken away from what Steve said, but the first thing they taught you on the 7 controllables, the first lesson on both, AdCon taught the same class for both of them, was, we'll talk about uniform contracts, for example. They say it's the worst contract in the world because it's the most ironclad contract you can't get out of. They've thought of every program because you have to give them outs and they have time to correct it. And if they don't do it, blah, 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 whatever. Another problem is they talk you into 5 and 7 year contracts that have yearly uplifts and then change fees and upfit fees and rip fees. And if the tech gains weight or lose weight, the cost of it. I will not. So the 2 worst words to me in the entire automotive industry is first, guarantees with techs. Ted, we've talked about it until we're blue in the face. And contracts. I hate contracts. Any vendor I do business with, and a lot of them are partners with us on here, Ted, will tell you I'm Mr. Anti-contract. I'll do Mr. Handshake. And if you do good business with me and do good business for me, there's no need to have a contract because we're going to be on a handshake, okay? I have a trainer that we all know, John Fairchild. Yes. Done business with John for 8 years. I've never signed a contract with John. It's a handshake, and never have we had a problem because he does what I ask him to do. But to Steve's point, it's the little things that you don't see that come and that, you go through this after you sign the contract, the sales rep disappears because he doesn't care. He got paid his commission and you get turned over to implementation and implementation turns over to your sustainment person. And all of a sudden the little things start coming in. Again, back to uniform contracts. You sign the contract for 3 rugs. Next thing you know, there's 16 or 17 rugs in the dealership that you're paying $12 a week for that you could go to Sam's Club and buy for $24. It's constantly, and if you're not keeping track of it, or if you don't have the person keeping track of it, that expense grows over 3, 5, 7 years. And I'm not just picking on the uniform companies of the world, but they're one of the worst. Telecom, as now fiber comes in. It's funny when you do a buy sell, you find out all the phone numbers that are coming into a store that they had no idea they were paying for, by the way. Or, give me a list of all your phone numbers so we can have people call them, because that's one of the things we do. And they go to a lost voicemail that's been full for 6 years, but you've been paying for it. But listen, at the end of the day, not every vendor's on your side. They don't complain when they cash the check.
Steve, does this sound familiar?
Yeah. I'm not sure if I need to be on here. I just have a Shon do it. You can validate everything I'm saying. Oh yeah, 100%. Yeah, everything that Shon mentioned is like, he should be a spokesperson for our company.
Steve, I'm thinking about, all the examples that Shon just mentioned, and I'm sure a lot of dealers that are listening today, their head is starting to spin because they're thinking about, oh my gosh, all of these pieces that I have not taken into consideration. I would love to get your perspective. Have you seen specific vendor costs rise without clear explanations? And if so, what examples could you give our audience today?
Yeah, I think we're going to unfortunately beat on the same industry. Yeah, I mean, the industrial laundry piece is where we see it. Of the 4 areas that we review, that's one where we constantly see price escalations and contract drift is what I like to call it. And I think, we're just looking at one where someone had signed up for, I'm not going to mention vendor names, but they signed up and the contract was effective January of this year. And then we started looking at doing an invoice audit, contract analysis in July. And then, basically the contract was stated so that no price increase for 12 months. And find out that in 6 months, the price increase has already started. And it was more than what the 12-month increase was going to be. So the customer is very perplexed. We were able to, unfortunately, we were able to go back and obtain a refund for them and set it straight, get the pricing rolled back to what it was supposed to be for that whole year. But yeah, so that's where we see it the most. And just like Shon said, it's there's these non-negotiated items too, which I think Shon is kind of alluding to there, where you sign up for three rugs, now you have 12, and they're upgraded rugs. They weren't even the original rugs that from the $1 rug to the $12 rug or $7 rug, whatever. It happens so frequently, and I hate to say that they're doing it intentionally, but they do it a lot and they don't change it.
Shon, I know from our peers, a lot of dealers, we use that term fixed cost. It's kind of accepted, and a lot of dealers don't look, and it's an anticipated invoice every month. And I mentioned earlier, especially if those locations are scattered about and there's not one person to be checking all these things.
Correct. And especially now that in the conglomerate that the mom and pop dealerships are going away, right, and you have power in buying, okay? There's power in numbers. When I came to the Kaiser Group, they had 4 different uniform companies at 7 locations, now 8 locations. That doesn't make any sense. You have power in the 8 locations. And Ted, I am not a micromanager. I'm the exact opposite of that. But my uniform company, my now one uniform, and I'm picking on uniforms because it's something you got to have, but they're not allowed to add without authorization. It's not that I want to, by the way, I don't want to approve rugs, I promise you. But as soon as you put that stip on there, magically they stop increasing. I'm not, if you need a rug by the door because I don't want trip hazards or I don't want slip and falls because it does snow here, put a darn rug in there. I don't care. I don't need permission for that. I just don't need that many rugs. Okay. And I'm going to go on a little bit of a trail here. My question is, who has the authority to sign the contracts too? And I'm going to use your black background here for a second, Ted. There is a black hole of kickbacks out there. Okay. 31 years, I've never taken a kickback a day in my life. I never will. All right. But they're out there. And there's people that if they sign a contract, the money under the table money or the mailbox money or whatever cliche we've used throughout the years, they're out there. So you got to ask, who's getting that, and what's the motive to doing it? We can talk paper products and toiletries, and I know I'm getting weird there, but guys, you don't need to buy reams of paper. We say we're a paperless system. The last thing a dealership is paperless, by the way. Okay, and the reams of paper you go through. Look, price Amazon, because the amazing thing is they deliver. It's on time. It's there. You can put it on subscription. It's even cheaper. You don't have to buy, even though you've had a long-term relationship, and I appreciate that, especially if they buy vehicles from you. But if it's twice as expensive, it has to make sense. Paper's paper. Heck, you're shredding half of it now anyway. That path just keeps going.
So, Steve, dealers hire you to come in, okay, and do a consultation and tell us about that. These are some of the things that you look, and this is the low hanging fruit I think that you find fairly frequently.
Yeah, I would like to mention something, add on to what Sean said. That situation where you have multiple locations,
Yes.
I'm sure you consolidate into one vendor, and then you're supposed to have one master agreement, same pricing for all locations. We always find that's not the case. It's supposed to be. We see, location A, and it's not even close. Like A is getting a different price than B, C, D.
Yes.
I mean, it's so we kind of reel that back in. And the way we do this, yeah, we do a consultation. We'll do an invoice audit, line by line, go through it line by line, benchmark every line item on your invoice, and then we're looking for refunds at first, and then we're looking to benchmark your rates to make sure you're paying the least amount possible. And then the last part, probably maybe the most important part, is the monitoring, the ongoing monitoring.
Well,
We basically have engineered software. It took us 2 years to build, but we're able to go back to laundry. We can, receive those bills electronically or from the portal, from the vendor portal, and we can tell within, very short period of time where the contract is off, where the invoice is off from the contracted price. So the report automatically kicks out. Okay, all these items need to be submitted for refund. So we do that, and then we're constantly checking. So it's not like anyone has to do any extra work. Our proprietary software is doing that for them, and then basically submitting the request to the vendor directly, or we send the information to our client, and then they can send it to the vendor. But however the way they want to do it, but it's very seamless. It's very quick, and it's very important because, just like Sean said, it's maybe it's 3% increase here in every line item, and then you multiply that by 8 locations, 10, 20, 12 months, 3 years, it gets out of control fast. And we're talking thousands of dollars, not just a few dollars. It's 20 to, I'd say, we can go up to 50% sometimes on cost reduction.
Steve, this is really fascinating because I'm thinking about, in the situation that you just described, even if a dealership has multiple rooftops, oftentimes, different brands that they have might be different sizes. So they're not maybe paying attention to that invoice in that way because, again, they're different number of employees, different needs to operate those buildings. So how often do dealerships benchmark what they're paying versus, their peers of a similar size? And then, what are some of the best practices that you've been able to implement, with that comparison?
Yeah, that's a great point. I'm glad you said that. I forgot to mention it. So benchmarking, I don't know if it happens in most cases. So, well, here's this. They're benchmarking, but against themselves. They'll receive a quote from 3 different vendors, but that benchmarking is just really against, their locations, their business, and then the 3 vendors. And where we can come in, we have a massive benchmarking database. I think I mentioned before where, we know what someone in Syracuse, Wisconsin, San Diego, California, we know what they should be paying for these items. And then, so we kind of provide them, either we provide them with the data or we use the data to help them negotiate better. So we'll negotiate for them, or we can give them the data and insights to negotiate on their own behalf. So it's, and then going back to what Sean said, who's to sign for this? So in our contracts, we don't accept the vendor's contracts, and just like I'm sure Sean will agree with this,
Yep.
where we strike out things, add our own verbiage in there, and we also say you cannot make changes unless this ABC person approves it. It can't just be the counter person or the first person you see when you walk into the rooftop. So that's one of the things, is making sure that not everyone can sign, or only certain people can sign for additional items.
This is powerful information. Sean, your thoughts?
Well, I want to answer Sarah's question. I'll answer that if you don't mind as well. When and how do you monitor it? Now, again, I'm with a group that's heavy into NCM. We do 20 group meetings, okay? And everything has a percentage and everything, and the reason I like NADA, and when I went to the academy there, was as long as your percentages, I don't care whether you sell 1 car or 100 cars, as long as your percentages are in line, you're going to make money, okay? There is a percentage, there's an acceptable number of percentage down to the 10th that if, as long as it's in line, it makes sense. Now that doesn't mean that they're looking at it as granularly as Steve. Obviously, Steve's company does, and they don't pull the contracts individually. But it's a good place to start. That if your controllable percentage is 2 or 3 points high, to Steve's point, guys, that's $1,000 a month. That's 12 grand a year times
Sure.
10 stores. That's $120,000. That's an employee. That's a service writer, for goodness sake. I mean, that's how soon this adds up and how much it counts. So again, we do 20 groups as a whole twice a year, but we do it individually by the store every month. We're looking at percentages, and it's almost kind of like, and I know I'm getting in the weeds here again, I apologize. It's kind of like going through open ROs every Friday. If you do that, month end's not such a big deal because it's just another day on the calendar and it goes away quickly. So if you do it regularly, it's not that hard to control. And I know that's what Steve's company does, and kudos to him, because we don't do a good job. And if you don't have a purchasing agent or somebody designated to do it, that quite frankly, you could probably do an ROI on really quick to point Steve's company of, listen, okay, you're going to pay Steve's company X amount of money to do this. Well, that's an expense. It's not an expense if he's saving you twice the return.
Steve, how do you? And by the way, I was going to ask, how do you work? Do you work on how is your fee structured? How's that structured?
Yeah, it's a performance basis. So yeah, they don't even, no one pays us unless we find them something, unless they realize refunds and or savings going forward.
Wow. Okay. Steve, a lot of dealers right now in mid-November are making their plans for 2026 and looking forward as to budgets, what they're going to spend, what they're going to make, how they're going to increase those revenues, how they're going to save some money. Steve, how does our audience get their questions answered? I'm sure they would start off typically by asking you some things about their organization. How do dealers reach you, and how do they get started?
Yeah, they can reach out to me, on the scrolling on the bottom of the screen here, the phone number. You can call, text, email me. I'm on LinkedIn, pretty heavy on LinkedIn. And also, just real quick, we just created this profit calculator. It takes 60 seconds. They type in their expenses, and it'll give them a range, low to high. Again, we have to get into the weeds to find out exactly what it is for them, customize it, but it'll give them an idea of what what they can expect. And we have a QR code. I can share that with you. I have a link to the website page, and then I'd say within 60 seconds, as long as they know some information, the annual spend in these certain areas, they can find out what's possible, and then we'll have to do a deep dive to actually figure out what it actually is for them. Could be higher, could be lower. And I always say there's a chance it could be zero, but it's over 90% of the time it will not be zero, and it's going to be, like Shon said, it's going to be enough for one employee or one. And I'm glad Shon mentioned that, because a lot of times it's just not dollars. It's like, what are you going to do with those dollars, those extra dollars? What can you do with them? That's very important. So I'm glad Shon mentioned that.
For our audience watching, we have a QR code on the screen. If you're watching this live right now, check your email. We just sent you an email with a link to that ROI calculator where you can go ahead right now and fill it in and put your own information in there. And that will hook you up with Integrity Cost Consulting and Steve Thompson, and look at your own numbers and see where you stand. Steve, what a great service for our industry. And I know with the holiday coming up next week, we want to thank you and the team there at Integrity Cost Consulting, and wish you a very happy Thanksgiving next week and your family as well.
Yeah, thank you. Very blessed to be here. Thank you, and happy Thanksgiving to all of you as well.
Shon, you're both up in the snow country. It could snow at any time up in Western New York or in Wisconsin. So
maybe, hopefully, hey, there's nothing better than Lambeau Field with some snow. That's all.
That's right. Yeah.
All right. Okay. All right. Everybody, Steve Thompson, the man to speak to, Integrity Cost Consulting, here with us today at the Fixed Ops Roundtable.